Pleasure to see you again.
It's great to see you, and I'm glad that you brought the chairs from your TV show, because I told you before, I used to deliver the newspaper as a boy, so I used to wake up every morning as a kid and have something like this on my front steps that had been dropped off by a big truck, and then I would go deliver it. So this is sort of a Proust's Madeleine type thing for me.
So lovely, but even seeing you smiling and rubbing there, you look like the happiest vagrant I'd ever seen. And even being touched by you then, you strike me as a man who gives good hugs.
Oh, thanks. Well, I'm American, so so we hug, and I'm big and I'm hairy. I have a new cologne, so it's...
What, like your own brand that you've brought out?
Yeah, I make it.
Yeah.
I make it out of my own essence. I extrude it, and now it's on.
Yeah. I love that Man by Rob Delaney, and just women everywhere, just instantly pregnant. We should talk about the book, which I don't know if anyone's read it. It's an extraordinary book. It's called A Heart That Works, and it's about your son Henry that passed away. And I always feel like we have a sort. I don't know if this is weird to say this, but I feel like we have a connection, because I think it was the first time you'd spoken about Henry on TV was on my show.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
And I felt such it's one of the interviews I'm most proudest of, but also most terrified about doing. I remember doing it, I remember there was a word I said to you when I said, I just don't know what I'm meant to say.
Right.
And it feels like this book and the way that you talk about the loss of your son really helps people figure out what to say and ultimately just say something.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and thank you, because that interview was great, and it was, when it went on YouTube, so many bereaved parents and siblings shared it with each other, and I don't say anything new or original. I just listen to other bereaved parents and people who've been through terrible tragedies, synthesize it and barf it back out. So I'm no better or no worse than any other bereaved parent, but being in the public eye, I do try to just talk about it honestly. And so that interview, I know our discussion was helpful to a lot of people, so I was very grateful for that. Yeah, and then in terms of saying stuff, the book, although I did make it out of words, I was...
You might imagine that it was just noises with Rob Delaney.
But I did my best to show rather than tell, because in times of incredible grief, words really don't do a lot, but actions do. So in the book, I tried to illustrate how the people who came over and just said, hey, put down, close the laptop that you're arguing with, the council about social care hours with, take off your shoes, lie down, take a nap, I'm gonna take your kids to the park. The people who did stuff like that, or the people who rang the doorbell and ran away after leaving, some spaghetti bolognese there. That's the type of stuff that helps so massively. Because a lot of people are get nervous and they want to be well, let's make it unhappen. Why don't we, for all intents and purposes, how about it didn't happen, and they'll try to shove it in a drawer, which makes me want to kill them and festoon and maybe decorate a Christmas tree with their entrails. But if they're
And that's the tension I felt.
But if they acknowledge that it happened, then I feel sane, cared about, and then the storm of emotions that comes up in me quite frequently can kind of be metabolized or dissipate or whatever. And so it's just really nice to have people, even for a second, because that's how long it takes, a second, maximum literally 4 seconds on the outside. And that's the nicest thing you can do for somebody.
Was it painful to write?
Sometimes, if I put in a proper 40-hour work week, which I did sometimes, because I didn't want to really stew in it. I didn't want to spend a long time writing the book. I wanted to get it out in an honest manner and in a clear manner. I felt that was sort of my only responsibility. And so I did work pretty quickly on this book, or I guess efficiently, I don't know. I mean, I showed up and wrote every day. And if I did too much in a week, it was fairly exhausting. So I knew to pace myself, or learned to pace myself a bit. When I did that, I actually benefited, I felt, from the writing process because it helped me understand some things, see things more clearly, place them in context. It gave me a much deeper appreciation for how amazing my wife and my other sons were throughout the process, because it just set down in black ink on white paper how wonderful they are. So that felt good to, be ostensibly working and then just sort of unspooling their majesty and how wonderful they are. So it made me fall deeper in love with the people that live in my house. I loved them before, but now I was like, oh, now it's a whole new level. So that was really cool.
It's such a multifaceted book because it's heartbreaking, then it's funny, then there's revelations. One of my favorite bits in the book is when you speak about the importance. You're so glowing about all the people that cared for Henry, and you mention their names, and there's no bullshit here. You're not saying, oh, the people. It's specific names of men and women that looked, and then they came to Henry's memorial. Yeah. It's beautiful. And then you speak about one day when they bring in care dogs to like a little care dog that goes to the hospital, and there's this beautiful paragraph where you hilariously point out your problems with small dogs. That is just hilarious about how you don't trust them, you don't like these yappy things that ultimately humans have made. What's the cutest thing I can create to put in my handbag and march about? That you hate these dogs. Yeah. We're with you. And then seconds later, the dog comes in and plays with Henry, and you realise the importance of that person. And we live in a world where we go, well, what does that matter? Well, why should we have dogs in hospitals? But the way you speak about that is so beautiful because it was the most perfect thing for your son at that moment.
Oh, it was such a joy. He was so happy, and he was hooked up to all kinds of shit. He had a big brain tumor next to his brain stem, and when they took it out, they were amazing surgeons, but they really had no choice. They did have to damage his brainstem and cranial nerves around it. So he was disabled by the removal of the tumor, and that led to him having a tracheostomy, which meant he couldn't speak. And it also, because you meddle around in the brainstem, it meant he couldn't walk. And so when the little dog came in, I unhooked him from a bunch of stuff safely. I knew what it all was. And I put him on the floor, and he was so ecstatic. And even though he couldn't walk, he could shuffle around on his bum very fast. And so he just shuffles up to this beautiful little dog and is so happy. And the reason, and I tried to communicate it in the book, that what is happening is so wonderful, is that also nerve damage led to him having Bell's palsy. So half of his face was totally paralyzed. The other half was not. So you could see the half that wasn't paralyzed went into like a smile that like threatened like the musculature of his face. It was like, because you could compare it, so you could like chart, like exactly calibrate how happy he was, and it was insane. And so he was so beautiful and so happy, and he had he had lost his hair from chemo, and so he was just the sweetest little, beautiful, little kind of alien-looking little creature, and I was so in love with him, and he was just so happy to have this gross little dog come in, and so it was a very special day. So yeah, for the rest of my life, that'll be one of the last things I think about when a sniper's bullet explodes my skull in 11 years. I don't know why I said that.
That was the end of that story. Nobody anticipated.
Whatever,